Earlier we started looking at the fill settings that we have on shapes. We want to continue that in this video. Previously we looked at the plane color as well as our ability to make a linear gradient, and we had looked in the API and seen that there was also another type called a radial gradient. So there's the linear gradient, here's the radial gradient. So with the radial gradient we pass a focus angle, a focus distance, a center x, a center y, a radius, the Boolean for proportional, the cycle method, and our stops again. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to build one of these, and we're going to do it on a slightly different shape than we had before, because it'll help us to, this shape will help us to illustrate the last of the fill settings. So let's make a second path, and for this path, path2 dot elements plus equals a move to, let's see, where should we go? How about 10 comma 250? Sure. And then I'm going to do a, let's see, a V line, an H line, a V line, and then a cubic curve in here. So first let's do a V line 2, and we'll move down to say 590, and then we'll add an H line 2, and we'll move over to about 300, and then another V line 2, and we'll go to where we had been vertically, which is 250. And then the last setting here is going to be a cubic curve 2. It starts at the location that we have here, which is 300, 250, and then we get to specify 2 control points and follow it up with the endpoint. So 2 controls and then an endpoint, and I want to go ahead and close this off, so I want the endpoint to be where we started off. Okay, what about the first control point? Well, I want the first control point to be somewhere around this lower corner, which would be 10, 590, but I actually want to go further than that. So how about minus 100, 590. Okay. And then I want to move kind of off on the other side, similar direction. So instead of going to 300, I'm going to move to, say, we'll just go to 400 and 590. Okay. Let's see if that looks roughly the way that I want it to. See if I have that right. Yeah, that's a good shape. And you can see it's kind of sitting on top of, overlaps our other shape here a little bit. Now I'm going to first fill it in with a radial gradient. So path2.fill equals a radial gradient. And let's remind ourselves of all the arguments that we pass in here. A focus angle in degrees, a focus distance, which is a double, the center of the fill, a radius for the fill, proportional, cycle method, stop. So focus angle, I'm good with 45 degrees. Focus distance, how about we go with 20 for that. The center, well, it might be nice if the center is somewhat close to the center of this whole thing. So how about we go to about 150 in X, and in our Y, let's go 500. So it'll be kind of centered horizontally, but a fair bit below that vertically. Okay, so those are our first four arguments. After that is a radius for the radial gradient. I want to come somewhat close to the edge, so how about 100? After the radius, we have the proportional and the cycle method. So proportional, as before, we're going to go with false. The cycle method will be cycle method dot, how about I do a repeat? We've already seen what a reflect looks like. And then no cycle would just maintain the colors past the ends. And then we need all of our stops. So our first stop, well heck, if I'm not feeling too inventive here, I think it's actually reasonably good for comparison purposes to just have the same ones that we had before. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. Okay, so I have my center, I have the focus. I wonder if I should make the radius a little bit larger or make the focal distance a little bit smaller, so we don't have quite as much repeat on the one side. And you can see we kind of have this radial pattern going out. The orientation here is off at 45 degrees, and because it's repeating, it goes from black to red to green to white, and then immediately starts black, red, green, white over again. So it's similar to the linear, but it has a somewhat different structure. The last setting is significant for this shape because I put this loop in here. Now, sometimes you want this loop filled in, and sometimes you don't. And whether you get that loop filled in is based upon what is called the fill rule. So that is our last fill setting here. And there is a type for fill rule. So when we have our, let's see, fill rule is actually part of shape, not paint. Our fill rule can be either even, odd, or non-zero. Now what does that mean? Well, non-zero means that when we come into the shape, if I cross a non-zero number of lines, we're going to fill it in. That's what this is using right now. And that's why it fills in this, because in order to get in this area, I have to cross one line, two lines. Okay? Pretty much no matter how you go, I can go right here, but I'm basically crossing two lines simultaneously. So I'm always crossing two lines to get into here, which means that it's non-zero. We can be explicit about that by setting path2 dot fill rule equals fill rule. I have an extra e in there, non-zero. Something I should note is that the constants that are in all caps are likely going to be changed in later editions, so this will probably change to capital N, O-N, capital Z, lowercase ERO. So it will use standard camel case instead of the all caps, most likely in the future. Okay, so this looks exactly the same because non-zero is what it was using by default. But what if I don't want that center filled in? Well then, there is a setting for even odd. And the even odd setting will only fill things in if you cross an odd number of lines, and it leaves them blank if you cross an even number of lines. So when we cross this line, this whole region here, you cross one line, which is an odd number, and to get into here you would have to cross two lines, which is an even number, so it doesn't fill it in. So you have a plain fill that uses just a color, We have radial gradients that we can color things in with. We have radial gradients that we can color things in with. And for complex shapes that cross over themselves, you can vary the fill rule to either be non-zero or even odd. So you have a lot of control over how you're going to fill things in.